Good evening. We're on the way home, but there's no easy rides now. This is the week of truth, and 7 days from now, we'll know the winner of the 1987 Tour de France. And there'll be no arguments. The winner of this particular race is truly the winner. Between now and the finish, there's 6 days in the mountains, starting with a time trial on Mont Ventoux. In all, the riders are facing climbs totaling 100,000 feet over the next few days. That's equivalent to cycling up Mount Everest 3 times. I asked you to think about that when we left you last night. It's quite staggering, isn't it? Well, our action this evening comes from the slopes of Ventoux, the only mountain in the Tour where a rider has died. That rider, the great Tommy Simpson. Phil Liggett reports.
The saddest moment in the history of the Tour de France happened 20 years ago when Tommy Simpson died trying to win the race for Great Britain. It happened in the last kilometre on the slope of Mont Ventoux in the heart of Provence, in the height of one of the hottest summers for many, many years. As you can see around us here, it's a barren landscape. You could be standing on the moon. Most of the year, this mountain is covered in snow, and very little grows. It is a most inhospitable place. Simpson was on the mountain here in 1967, a kilometre from the summit, when he was seen to zigzag on his bike across the road. He then fell. His helpers rushed to pick him up, and the words Simpson said have now become immortal. He said, "Put me back on my bike." They did. Simpson zigzagged again and fell again. And then he was given oxygen. A helicopter landed and took him away to hospital. Tommy Simpson was already dead. Simpson was a most remarkable man. Earlier this week, on the anniversary of the death of Tom, the 13th of July, his wife Helen has been here, along with his former teammate who rode the Tour that tragic year, Vin Denson, to lay the flowers of the mountain on his stone. Simpson was so special. He was an Olympic bronze medalist. He is still the only British cyclist ever to win the Professional World Championship. He's won major classic races like Milan-San Remo, the Tour of Flanders and Bordeaux-Paris. He finished 6th in the Tour de France, and even to this day, he's still the only rider from Great Britain who's worn that leader's yellow jersey. In fact, when he wore it, he was the only British speaker ever to. Now, Tom Simpson is no longer with us, but my goodness me, his memory goes on. He's the name that every British cyclist wants to emulate. He's still the best bike rider we ever had. Wouldn't it be nice now if Robert Miller or even Stephen Roche could win the Tour de France? Simpson, above all, would rest in peace.
Phil Liggett with his own very personal tribute to the great man, Tom Simpson. Well, it won't be long now before we see our first action this evening. Before that, for those of you that haven't been able to join us all week, let's just remind ourselves what's been going on. It was a week, of course, that was marred right at the very beginning by the loss of the world's #1, Ireland's Sean Kelly, but it's been another fascinating 7 days nonetheless.
To tell you, is out of the 1987 Tour de France. He came into this race determined to do well, and he's been taken out by a quirk of fate in this race that shows a mercy to no one.
You're right, Sean. You're right, boy. You're right, Sean.
Well, every dag must have his day, and stage 14 is the one for Lauritsen.
Well, You're the man who likes the holidays, you like to travel the world, and yesterday you had sea and sun. Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, we rode through a broken sewage pipe. It was up to about our knees. You had to put a peg on your nose or you would have suffocated. But it was quite fun, I think.
Delgado, Roach, Bernard, Alcala and Herrera, the real talent in this year's Tour de France, are on the attack. And this is going to be a good finish for Raul Alcala. It looks he's going to get second place. Jean-Francois Bernard has shattered third. Stephen Roach is fourth. Hampton is fifth. Delgado is sixth. And for the first time in the Tour de France, we have called to you the names who matter. And Jean-Paul Van Poppel in green comes through on the inside. This is a marvellous sprint finish. Bontempi, oh my, I couldn't split them on the line. Absolutely impossible. We think Van Poppel took him by the skin of his racing tyre. So Motti keeps the yellow jersey for the 5th consecutive day, but his lead is ever so fragile now.
The second full week of the 87 Tour de France. We've still no idea at all where the winner is coming from, and there's still plenty of life left in it yet. Let's check the overall classification. There are 2 riders from the British Isles in the top 5. Stephen Roach is still very much the favourite going into the last week. He's 1 minute 26 seconds behind Charlie Motte, the little Frenchman. Robert Miller is 5 minutes 40 back, but we'll expect to see a lot more of him now over the next 6 days or so. Likewise, Alcala, who's had a smashing tour so far. Hampton, the American, who's finding some sort of form at exactly the right time. Herrera, Wilchers and Zimmerman, who finished 3rd on last year's tour. Adrian Timis is best placed of the ANC riders, 56th. Ketislav Palov is 102. Malcolm Elliott, who very nearly won that stage into Avignon on Friday, is 111th. Steve Swart is 153rd, and Guy Galopin 163rd. Luis Herrera is in the polka dot jersey. That's worn by the King of the Mountains. We should see some cracking competition for that over the next few days. It's Jean-Paul Van Poppel in green, which is for the most consistent finisher. Van Poppel is the only man so far on this tour to have won 2 stages. Jeff Leakins and Stephen Roach are the other 2 riders in the frame. Another Irishman, Martin Early, is chasing the red jersey. We'll expect to see him chasing Duclos LaSalle very hard in the mountains. Red, remember, is for the catch sprints. The white jersey for the best novice, Alcala, is in white at present. Then it's Breukink, who won the 13th stage, and Z Peugeot's Bruno Cornelier. Jean-Francois Bernard, who's 2nd in the overall classification, wears the multicoloured all-rounders jersey. Herrera and Alcala, perhaps not surprisingly, are also in there. System U, who have won 5 stages so far, and they might not add to that total now because they like it flat, lead the overall team positions. Then it's Toshiba and Robert Miller's Panasonic team in 3rd place. Well, that's where we'll take a break. In a moment, we'll be watching our first action from the time trial on Mont Ventoux. Don't go away. Hello again. Well, the riders back in action today after resting up on Saturday. A lot took full advantage of the opportunity, fully aware of what lay in wait. Many were actually, would you believe, on Ventoux finding their mountain legs. We're on stage 18, a vicious time trial on Mont Ventoux. Each man on his own, against the clock, over 36 kilometres. At times they'll be climbing gradients of 1 in 8, up to a total of 6,200 feet. Well, we start with news of ANC's Malcolm Elliott.
Well, among the early starters today, out almost before the sun came up, was Malcolm Elliott, and he started in the last 53 men in the race. But it was a good ride by Malcolm Elliott. In fact, he said he wasn't going to try too hard. There didn't seem a lot of point. But on the climb, he discovered a lot of English voices of encouragement. And by the time he came to the finish, Malcolm Elliott did a very, very good time of 1 hour, 27 minutes and 25 seconds. And that was the third best time of the morning from the first 53 men to start. But it wasn't such a good day for Martin Early of Ireland in the Fagor team, because Early had bike trouble and had to change a back wheel. And by the time he reached the summit, his time was rather slow. 1 hour, 31 minutes and 52 seconds. But of course, all the main contenders in the Tour de France were starting among the back 20 in the race. And the situation then at 19 kilometres, all the riders now through this point. Jean-Francois Bernard, the second from last to start, gets the best time. And Jesper Skibby there, the second best time. Skibby has already finished today and is out of the top 4 on the leaderboard. And this is the situation now of the top riders down on that top time by Jean-Francois Bernard. Delgado, 52 seconds behind. Robert Miller started today in 5th place, 1 minute and 6 seconds down. Luis Herrera, minute 9 seconds behind. Andy Hampston of America, 1:35. That is the time gap on Jean-Francois Bernard, who is now the fastest rider through the first check, and all the riders are now past that 19 to 20 kilometre point. The Breton flag waves there, the black and white flag on top of Mont Ventoux. An absolutely clear blue sky to one side of the mountain, but on the other side, over the farmlands of Provence, there are pure white clouds. The temperature about right for this mountain climb today. It's not too hot, and out in the sunshine, it is almost quite pleasant to watch the Tour de France. This is, of course, the time trial every rider has feared almost since the race left West Berlin. Those who have survived, indeed, the long way down to Provence, because there were 207 set off, and now there are just 164 left in the race. You can see the enormous crowd lining this climb. You can hardly put a pin between them, actually, all the way down Mont Ventoux. They're not just here at the top of the climb, they're right down into the woods, and it looks as though we might have a new leaderboard, a new leader coming up here. We've got Fabio Parra coming into our sight. You can see his time there, 1:17 at the moment and counting. The best time at the top of the mountain, which is directly above the head of Fabio Parra at the moment, has been done by Marshal Guéant, 1:22:36. But Parra has set the best time at the 30 kilometres point, which he went through in just over the hour. So this is something to be expected, I think, Paul, from Parra.
Well, it's amazing to notice that actually most of the climbers have gone along the flat and lost around about a minute to the leaders. The specialist time trials like Robert Miller, the specialists like Jean-Francois Bernard, Stephen Roach, and obviously Marshal Guéant. But now we've got to the climb, it's amazing to see how fast these riders, the pure climbers, are coming up, and this is where they're advantaged, because you can lose something like a minute over the first 20 kilometres to a rider on the flat, but if you have a bad day on the mountain like this, you can lose something like a minute every kilometre. So it just goes to show the difference between the times that can be lost and gained on this type of a mountain finish. And Parra actually has come up this mountain so fast that it'll be amazing to see what time Herrera is going to come up, because he's a lot more fluent climber, a lot better at this sort of solitary effort than Parra. So I think we could see some incredible times towards the end of today's event.
First, just look at the activity here as the supporters try to snatch a picture of Fabio Parra, because this man could be in the top 3 or 4 finishes today on this climb, and he knows it. He's the number 2 in the Capi de Colombia team, a team that runs on an annual budget of £3 million to try and win the Tour de France. They've already won the Tour of Spain this year with Herrera. They're aiming for a very nice double, a unique double indeed in Colombia, if they can win the Tour de France this year. So Parra, a winner of a stage, 1985 at Villard de Lans, but it wasn't quite as hilly as this, and we go to Villard tomorrow, of course, as we go into the Alps for a few very, very difficult days, as if this Tour de France hasn't been hard enough. So Parra now still challenging that time of Guéant. It's going to be close, but it's still possible here. Parra, just look at the crowd here. They know the time of Guéant. They all got radios, of course, and they're all shouting down to him. In fact, in Colombia, they'll be seeing these pictures as well, and it's about 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, and they have been live since 5 a.m. this morning, bringing them pictures of the Tour de France, both on radio and on television, of course. This enormous crowd closes in on the little Colombian and opens like magic as the police motorcyclist goes through, bringing through yet another rider of the Tour de France. These gods on bikes who just seem to never tire as they go on for mile after mile. The bronze figure, Fabio Parra, he's just got one hairpin to come now, and if he can get round that and sprint up it, then he's going to set the best time. It's still a fair way, it's 200 or 300 meters to the line. Changes for gears, very difficult climb to choose the right pedaling ratio here. Just the wrong gear means your legs seize up as they hit the resistance of the pedals. So you've got to choose the exact gear that allows those pedals to flow fluidly. He seems to have found it, he's back in his rhythm, and just look at his face now. He must know it's so close, he's just going to come down to a minute inside. It just actually shows you, though, what a great ride that Marshal Gaillon, a non-climbing specialist, has done today, because Parra is going to challenge the time, but it's going to be touch and go. We're inside the minute now. Parra's going to get it. He's going to go top of the leaderboard. He was best time at the 30-kilometer point. He's going to go top of the board now as he comes up to the line to a very, very appreciative round of applause. Colombia goes on top, pushes France into second place. 1 hour, 21 minutes, 48 seconds for the climb. And that's the target to beat now. And we're now seeing for the first time Laurent Fignon, and you can see he started 3 minutes behind Parra. He's already lost another 3 minutes on the finish time of Parra. So it looks to me as though Parra has possibly taken almost 6 minutes out of Laurent Fignon on the climb today, and that could spell disaster for Fignon. Laurent Fignon here now in the yellow headband, beginning to struggle. He had a bad time trial halfway through the Tour de France last year, and when he made the Pyrenees, in fact, he abandoned the race. He's done a good time trial reasonably well earlier on last week. Now it looks as though he's on a bad one here on Mont Ventoux, and I'm wondering if we might see a complete turnaround now in Laurent Fignon as we go off into the Alps. I really did feel, Paul, this man was going to give us something of rather a surprise today, and he isn't going to.
Well, the form he's been showing the last few days on the flat stages, I honestly thought he'd come back to something of his old form as well, but it just goes to show that you can show yourself as being a very strong man on the flat, but when it comes to a stage like this, you can't hide. It's sheer strength to get up here, or for the climbers, it's a sheer power to weight ratio, because a lot of the climbers like Parra and Herrera, they'll weigh something like 10 kilos less than Laurent Fignon, and he definitely hasn't got the force back. In fact, I think by the time he gets to the top of the mountain here, he won't have done a ride as good as Adrian Timmis. He's going to be around about 127, which is a similar ride to the ride that Malcolm Elliott did, and he told me he didn't really force it very much.
Indeed. I wonder if we'd have told Adrian Timmis this morning that he was going to climb Mont Ventoux faster than 2 times Tour winner Laurent Fignon. I think he would have thought we'd gone out of our brains. But indeed, Paul, he is going to be slower than Adrian Timmis. Timmis' time, 1 hour, 26 minutes and 41 seconds. And Laurent Fignon is going to be around 128 and maybe even up towards 129. So Laurent Fignon certainly losing now his 12th place overall in the Tour de France, because Parra, who was 13th, will nip over him certainly, and maybe 2 will be Bertbreur and Echevet, who've already finished. Now here is one of the leading favourites for this year's Tour de France. He's come good in the last few days. He was 3rd last year. He hasn't shown so well at the start of this Tour de France, but Zimmermann is beginning to look better now. Look at the crowd here further up the mountain, because Zimmermann is closing in fact, on Laurent Fignon. Look at the crowd here now as they shout home Laurent Fignon up towards the final bend, and there's no doubt now that Fignon is going to be glad when this day is over. And what's the bet? He won't stop at the top to give any comment at all to the journalists today, because whichever way you look at this, it's been a disastrous ride for Laurent Fignon. He's not only slower than Adrian Timmis now, he's also slower than Malcolm Elliott's time of 1 hour, 27 minutes and 25 seconds.
Well, this just goes to show how important it is to try and pace yourself, because he's probably tried to start very, very fast, as he would have done in his heydays, and what's happened is when he's got to the top of this climb, he's absolutely blown apart. And if you blow apart on a mountain, you really can't get going again. You lose everything, and you just as he checks his stopwatch, he probably can't believe the time that he's done there, especially when he sees Parra's time of 1:21.
Well, here's Zimmermann,
carving his way through the people, but looking at those midway times there, they're based on the best time so far of the day, which is still done by Fabio Parra. On the best time of the day at that point, which is 20 kilometres, which has been done since by Jean-Francois Bernard. And for Zimmermann coming up here now, he will not know the time of Bernard at that check 20 kilometres back. But the 3-minute gap by Andy Hampsten is significant, and the 5-minute 12-second gap behind Bernard by Alcala is almost disastrous. Again, we're seeing minutes play their part in this year's Tour de France. And if Jean-Francois Bernard can continue at the pace he's setting on the lower slopes, he is going to be the real challenger to win this Tour de France, and will certainly be in the leader's yellow jersey tonight for sure. All that's to come as we're on the climb now near the top, because we're watching Zimmermann. Zimmermann, third in the Tour de France last year behind Greg LeMond and Bernard Hinault. Hinault, of course, now retired and the technical advisor of the Tour de France. And Greg LeMond watching this on television from the United States, because that's where he is trying to recover from a shotgun injury just before the Tour started while he was out hunting. Up to the line comes Zimmermann. His time much better than much better than Fignon's rather, but not that good. Only 17th place and 1 hour 25 minutes for the ride. Just look at the time now of Luis Herrera, because this is a great time. Herrera, remember, just a few seconds, 29 to be exact, over Parra at the 30 kilometres point. We're now coming up towards the last kilometre here, and Luis Herrera, wearing the polka dot jersey as leader of the King of the Mountains, is in his rhythm, and he's on a real ride, Paul.
Well, that's absolutely incredible, the time that he's done here. In fact, he's obviously caught and passed Andy Hampsten, who started 3 minutes in front of him. Well, that'll be a big blow for Andy Hampsten's morale, because he would have expected to be one of the favourites for today's stage. But look at the way this rider goes up these climbs. He just gets into his rhythm. He's a pure climber, one of the best climbers in recent years, and he just turns those pedals round, and it's amazing to watch him, because he doesn't show any emotion at all. He's probably reminiscent of somebody like Charlie Gaulle, who was one of the better climbers, or Federico Barmontes. They were just pure climbers, and the time that they could put into somebody on a climb was enough for them to win the time back in the mountains to win the Tour de France.
Well, there's the situation now, the definitive situation at 30 kilometres, and Jean-Francois Bernard goes through there also. Fastest time in 1 hour 41, 1 hour 1 minute 41 seconds. He's better than Herrera by all those 2 minutes. That is absolutely amazing, because Jean-Francois Bernard is good on the hills, there's no doubt about that. But to get 1.5 minutes at 30 kilometres on the polka dot jersey here of Lucho Herrera, that is a tremendous performance. Herrera himself now beginning his climb up the mountain and up the overall classification. He's going to jump over Andy Hampsten. He started behind him, he's caught Andy Hampsten, and he's going to jump over Alcala also. So Luis Herrera now, Lucho as they call him, is on his way up the mountain. Paul Sherry mentioned Federico Barmontes, who used to call him the Eagle of Toledo, and he talked of Charlie Gaulle. He was known as the Angel of the Mountains. We're going to have to find something now, Paul, to call this man from Colombia. He comes up the mountains towards the top, 1 hour 19 minutes and ticking away. It's almost certain he'll pit Fabio Parra at the top, his own teammate, but he's going to have to keep hanging on there. Every second will count, because Jean-Francois Bernard is now setting the pace that is going to wipe everybody off Mont Ventoux if he can keep it up all the way to the line.
And as you look at him here, Phil, you can see that he doesn't even seem to be suffering at all. He's just keeping that rhythm going all the way up this last kilometre now, just letting the pedals turn around. He doesn't even seem to be suffering like some of the riders who've come up here before him. It's incredible to watch this rider go uphill, because it's just like poetry in motion, really. But it looks to me as if it's going to be a very, very close time. In fact, he may only take 15 or 20 seconds off Parra's time. But all said and done, it's amazing the speed that he's actually come up this mountain from the bottom.
Well, Herrera had just 29 seconds advantage over teammate Parra at the 30 kilometres check, and it doesn't look as though he's taken hardly any more time out of him at all. Coming round now to just a minute, but that final bend, it looks almost as if Herrera has had a pretty tough time maintaining his rhythm on the exposed last 7 kilometres of the climb, because the Mont Ventoux is in 2 slices. You go up through the trees, very narrow, very steep roads,
Then you break out into the heat of the mountain for the last 7 kilometres, where, of course, 20 years ago, Tom Simpson died. And now, Herrera comes into the lead round that very steep bend. Oh, and look at those legs ache as he gets out of the saddle. He has to search for the gears again to find his rhythm. That will have cost him 2 seconds. And then he sprints for the line, and it's very, very close to his teammate. It's hardly decisive, but Herrera is going to get first place on the board by just 25 seconds.
Well, they'll all be chasing Herrera now. Congratulations, incidentally, to Nick Faldo, who we hear has just won the Open Golf Championship up there at Muirfield. That's marvellous news. Our guest this evening in the studio, David Duffield, journalist and broadcaster. David, we started looking at Malcolm Elliott. We haven't been unfortunate, or we've been unfortunate enough not to see pictures of Adrian Timmis, but a great ride by Timmis today. 1 hour, 26 minutes and 41 seconds. He and Elliott producing, by their own standards, very good rides.
I think they're both courageous rides, actually, Richard, because they had a lot to lose, nothing to gain today. They're so far down general classification, one would have thought perhaps they'd ride up steadily, but they both put brilliant rides in. I mean, to beat a man like Finon, as both Timmis and Elliott have done, says a lot. But we shouldn't discount those lads, because Elliott is an ex-hill climb champion of Great Britain, and he's showing great courage, and Timmis is doing the same. And I think we haven't seen the last of these two yet either, even in the big hills yet to come.
We should have expected that from Herrera, I suppose, shouldn't we?
Oh, yes, but he's a natural mountain goat. These Colombians, when they come across, they just ride up those hills like they're dead flat. We can see that. I mean, that rhythm, that riding is brilliant. They've got a special gift, and there's certain climbers like that, and this tour is built for climbers this year. When you look at what's to come so far, it's all down to climbers and those chaps who can get up the mountains. And this one is only just the opening shot, you know.
David, thanks very much indeed for the time being. We've seen that Stephen Roach is going well, so too is Jean-Francois Bernard. We're getting those pictures in at the moment and turning them round. Looking forward to seeing those with you in a couple of minutes. Don't go too far away. Welcome back. We're on stage 18 of the Tour de France and into the last full week. Today's stage is an individual time trial on Mont Ventoux. We've seen some good, some bad performances so far. None better than Luis Herrera's, the little Colombian, who's in a time of 1 hour, 21 minutes and 23 seconds. He is the current leader. Well, Ventoux would appear to have destroyed Laurent Fignon's tour. Fignon well adrift now. We're waiting for Stephen Roach. Jean-Francois Bernard, we've already seen, is through the 30-kilometre barrier 1.5 minutes quicker than Herrera, so he's the man to keep an eye on now. As we go back, Scotland's Robert Miller is on the way to the finish. Like Fignon, it's make or break for Miller today too.
Now, where is Robert Miller? We felt for the last 2 days he's been a little bit in trouble physically. There were signs of the cracks beginning to open. The day the rains came down, Miller lost that minute or so when the field split on the run-in down to Blagnac. Then the next day on the steep climb up through the Black Mountain, there we saw Miller again lose time on the top riders, and he received a terrible rocket off his team manager Peter Post for allowing that to happen. The rest day has been since, and things can change on the rest day, of course. Riders can recover well, but there seems to me to be a long gap, Paul, before Robert Miller comes into our view.
Well, Robert does actually have 6 minutes before we would have expected him, but yes. Normally he should have been. We've got a rider just coming into view now, and it might well be Raul Alcala, but however, it could be Robert Miller, because Alcala's lost a fair bit of time, and in fact we're getting confirmation there that it is Robert Miller, so he must have caught and passed Alcala.
So Miller comes into our view now through this massive crowd on Mont Ventoux. He's picked up and passed Raul Alcala, the Mexican climber. Robert Miller now chasing the time of Luis Herrera. And there he is. This is the situation at 30 kilometres now. Miller, 3 minutes 38 seconds behind Jean-Francois Bernard at the 30-kilometre check. Charlie Motte, 2 minutes 46 seconds behind behind Bernard also, which means at this moment in time, Motte is out of that leader's yellow jersey, and it's going onto the shoulders of Jean-Francois Bernard. This is now Pedro Delgado coming into view, and Paul, this is an excellent ride from Delgado.
Well, this is absolutely incredible. This is one of the riders that everybody's been worried about, especially Robert Miller. And I would think now Delgado can see Robert Miller in front of him, so that's been there. You can just see Robert Miller in the top of the picture, and Delgado is going to be 3 minutes up on Robert Miller. Well, Robert was very, very worried since the start of this Tour de France on Pedro Delgado, and Delgado has said that he'd like to win this stage today and dedicate it to his mother, who died last year doing the Tour de France and caused him to retire because of the emotional distress. And I would think he's given everything he possibly can to try and win this stage today and dedicate it to his mother. And it'd be very, very close between Delgado and Herrera, because they're coming round there at a similar place, a very similar time, and Delgado might just beat Herrera on the line.
It's going to be close, Paul. It's going to be very, very close indeed. There's Robert Miller, and Delgado's right up on Miller there. Robert Miller doing a ride as well, of course, because although he's losing 3 minutes here to Delgado, the face of Miller now is telling us what we didn't want to see, I think, Paul. Pedro Delgado is riding like a metronome here. He's just looking straight ahead, punching those legs up and down. Robert Miller is going to feel very, very sad indeed, because he's going to be caught here by Pedro Delgado. Miller still fighting to survive in this Tour de France, and it does look as though the worst is being feared by us, that Robert Miller is beginning to crack in this last week of the Tour de France as we go off into the Alps. Herrera's time is also looking a little bit fragile now. Delgado's done a marvellous last 10 kilometres up this mountain. The Spaniard, who has always been a threat, the Spaniard who indeed has been a thorn in the side of Robert Miller. It was the Spaniard that stopped Robert Miller from winning the Tour of Spain a couple of years ago, when there was all that talk of collusion between Delgado and everybody else against Miller in the Tour of Spain. And Miller now caught and dropped here by the battling Spaniard Pedro Delgado, who seems to have received some sort of inspiration here, and he goes now clear of Miller coming up these last few slopes of Mont Ventoux. It's so difficult now to pick out the riders in the Tour de France amongst the crowd. We reckon there are 250,000 people on the slopes of Ventoux today, and they've all come to see these last few men, and they're watching a Spaniard challenge the time of Luis Herrera, which is beginning to count down here as Herrera grits his teeth. If only he knew just how close he was now to stealing the top time of the day as he comes up towards the final bend. It's going to be touch and go. He's still got plenty of fight in him, though. He kicks out of the saddle. He carries the number 51, the number that so many times has won the Tour de France before, been worn by Luis Ocaña, Jacques Anquetil, Eddie Merckx, Bernardino, and of course Eddie Merckx himself. There they are, coming up to the final bend. Pedro Delgado trying to take on Herrera's time, searches for the gears at almost the same point as did Herrera when he was there. Wings around this corner now, out of the saddle. He's done a much better corner there indeed, but the clock is going to stop him. 23, he's going now into second place. If it comes to 48, he will drop back into third, but Delgado is going to get second. He's going to take second place. He'll be delighted with this one. He'll get second place, 1:21.35. Pedro Delgado is in second position overall, and that's going to move him up the leaderboard tonight. He'll go ahead of Stephen Roach. If it all depends, of course, what Stephen does, but it'll be most interesting. We haven't got a lot of information yet on the climb of Stephen Roach, but he's going to take over 3 minutes more advantage over Robert Miller. He started the day in front of Miller. He's now going to be almost 5 minutes ahead of him as we go off into the mountains. Now we're seeing the rider who has set all of these amazing times. Miller, by the way, finished in 1 hour, 24 minutes and 58 seconds. But we're now back with the leader. And just look at the time here. The leader at every checkpoint so far. And he's won hill climbs before. He's won on Mont Ventoux indeed. Stephen Roach too is on a time check of 1:19. But this is turning out to be a battle of the greats. This is Raoul Alcala in the sights, I think, of Jean-Francois Bernard. And he started 3:69, 12 minutes ahead of Jean-Francois Bernard as Raoul Alcala goes round towards the last 300 metres. We're looking for the figure, really, of Jean-Francois Bernard, who is beginning to change the face of this Tour de France yet again. There he is, Paul, in the multicoloured jersey of the leader of this race, in the jack-of-all-trades jersey, if you like. But he's demonstrating here today one particular talent that could win in the Tour de France.
Well, he's the man that all France love, and he's the man that all France wants to take over from Bernard Hinault's place. And look at the agony on his face there. This is the kind of ride that we would have expected of Bernard Hinault in his heyday. He's the man who could actually ride better than the Colombians, the pure climbers, because Jean-Francois Bernard isn't a climber. He's regarded as a time trialist, a man expected to ride. Look at the agony on his face as he's pulling everything out here as he tries to tries to equal the mountain climbers. It looks as if he's coming into the 1 kilometre to go sign in a very similar time as Herrera and Parra, and if he can keep up that pace, he could very well go into the top 3 or 4 riders on this stage again.
Just look at this crowd surging forward now as the referees try to push them back to allow this man through. He was the fastest Czech at 20 kilometres, he was the fastest Czech at 30 kilometres. He was, in fact, Stephen Roach's own favourite to probably win the climb today. Well, Roach is still to come. We haven't seen Roach, but we're now looking at Bernard, and I think Bernard has already caught Stephen Roach because we haven't seen Roach. He could well have taken Stephen Roach today by 3 minutes, and that is going to make it a big, big gap for Roach to bridge in the mountains. Motte, we can safely say, is now out of the yellow jersey of the Tour de France. You're looking at the new number 1 in this race of change. Jean-Francois Bernard. Here is Stephen Roach now, and Stephen Roach's time is already slower than Luis Herrera's. The face here to Stephen Roach. He won that time trial last Friday, or week last Friday as it was now, in such magnificent circumstances at Futuroscope just outside Poitiers. But Stephen Roach is still ahead. He's still ahead of Jean-Francois Bernard. He's coming up towards the finish. Our camera's concentrating on the Frenchman. He hasn't caught Stephen Roach, and that's good news all round. Roach is coming up towards the finishing line. He's going to push Herrera very close. It's not going to be the best time, but it's going to keep him well in the fight. 4th place for Stephen Roach, 1:22.03. He's going to take this race into the Alps too, still very much a challenger. But he is the rider now who's going to be the talk of the town tonight. And there isn't much of one on top here at Mont Ventoux, but Jean-Francois Bernard is going to be the new yellow jersey in the Tour de France. How the wearing of number 1 works magic on the back of a rider. He wears it by default because last year's winner isn't here. His team, though, is number 1. He got the number because of his letter in the Alphabet. And Jean-Francois Bernard is coming up to the line now, and for him awaits the golden fleece of the Tour de France. He wins 1:19.44 to an enormous cheer here on the top of Mont Ventoux. Jean-Francois Bernard is the new overall leader of the Tour de France, but he's got it early. He now has to defend it through one of the most horrible weeks in the Tour de France in the Alps. And Stephen Roach has shown too he can maintain his challenge here, because Roach has finished in 5th place. Still we wait this long, long gap for Charlie Motte, the deposed yellow jersey. Charlie Motte started the day, I think expecting to lose the overall leadership of the Tour, and he certainly appears now to be doing just that. He should no longer be a challenger. The System U team, which was being led by Motte and Laurent Fignon, have had a forgettable day completely, and this is the reason why. The slow motion picture of agony, but agony which will shortly turn to joy for Jean-Francois Bernard, the man who has hated all his young career to be compared with the great Frenchman Bernard Hinault, because he said he wasn't yet as good as him. And perhaps today he's gone one step closer becoming as great as Bernard Hinault, because this is the sort of stage that Hinault would have excelled in, the mountain stage of the Tour de France, on the vicious slopes of Mont Ventoux. There is no easy way, even for the stars in the Tour de France. You have to go through the pain barrier so many times. It's just that your ability at the end of the day gives you the better performance. And for the performance today, that certainly has gone to Jean-Francois Bernard. And here comes Charlie Motte now, up towards the finishing line. His yellow jersey is certainly now lost and going onto the shoulders of another Frenchman, Jean-Francois Bernard. Bernard's time, 1:19.44. Motte already outside with 1:23.18. Fighting now to squeeze a place in the top 10, which he might just do if he can find the effort now to sprint to the line. But Motte's leadership of this Tour de France, the last 6 or 7 days, is all over for him. He comes up to the end of this most vile stage of the Tour de France, the climb of the barren slopes of Mont Ventoux. He finishes 9th place. He just makes the top 10. Charlie Motte, that will not be good enough to keep him in the overall lead of this year's Tour de France. And there is the overall result. Luis Herrera in 2nd place behind Jean-Francois Bernard. Pedro Delgado is 3rd. Parra gets 4th place at 2:04. And Stephen Roach lives to fight another day. He loses 2 minutes 19 seconds to Bernard. Marshall Gayon certainly the surprise at 2:52. And Charlie Motte in 9th place loses 3 minutes 58 seconds. And there is bad news for Robert Miller. He's finished 17th today up the mountain, but he's lost 5 minutes and 14 seconds to Jean-Francois Bernard today. So the barren slopes of Mont Ventoux may well have ruined the chances for Robert Miller in this year's Tour de France. And there is the confirmation, as if the French crowd needed to say it. Jean-Francois Bernard has captured the leader's yellow jersey on top of Mont Ventoux. What a day to win your first stage in the Tour de France this year. The young man has done what he promised to do. Now he's got to keep it on the terrain of the Alps. And there's the official general classification. Jean-Francois Bernard is now on top. Stephen Roach goes into 2nd place, 2 minutes 34 seconds behind. And Motte didn't do too bad after all. He holds on to 3rd place. Pedro Delgado of Spain, some say the real challenger now, in 4th place. Robert Miller only drops a place to 6th overall, but look at the gap, 9 minutes 43 seconds behind.